The NBA season is pretty much upon us, and joining me now to discuss a longtime NBA reporter, writer, Mark Medina. Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm doing well. I hope you're doing well too. I think we're both pretty excited about a new upcoming season, but at least for me, it feels like the season hasn't ended because there was a lot of stuff going on in the off season. So with that, with media days, there was so much to unpack.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure you were so busy. World Cup, guys spending the summer getting better, and then so many moves, to your point, particularly in the Eastern Conference, the balance of power shifting significantly, it seems. But let's start with Lakers Media Day, because I know you were there. A lot of people paying attention to what LeBron had to say. What were some of your bigger takeaways from attending that Media Day?
Well, I think the bigger takeaway specifically with LeBron James is that he's dedicating his 21st NBA season to his son Bronny, not just because of his son and what he means, but the fact that he went through that cardiac arrest and that scare earlier this summer during a freshman practice at USC. He has since said that Bronny's fully recovered and he's started rehabbing, and there's a lot of optimism that he'll be back in time for when the season begins in November. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. He also talked about the fact that he does want to play in 2024 Paris Olympics, but he's also unsure on whether this is truly his last season. Now, granted, he is under contract for 2 more years, so kind of like this past offseason, there's not any expectation that this is actually his last year, but it is a reality that LeBron's entering his 21st NBA season, and he's playing with house money at this point. But I think when you look at the big scope of things, while LeBron's words carry a lot of weight, what was interesting with this media day was there was not really any drama, no controversies about the roster fit or what management's going to do. Everything's been humming along because of their appearance in the Western Conference Finals and because they mostly brought back the same core. They have a lot of perspective from last season as well as from the Denver Nuggets championship run. That continuity can very well be the playing card for them to try to get an NBA title this season.
So, Mark, this was the first time that LeBron really addressed, at least to the core NBA media, everything that he went through relating to Bronny and him being in the hospital. I mean, was he pretty forthcoming about how difficult that entire experience was?
LeBron was extremely forthcoming. He was expressing a lot of relief that Bronny is okay. He was sharing how, what he described as a whirlwind, understandably so, with all the different emotions surrounding he and his family. But there's a lot of gratitude that he expressed with the fact that Bronny was able to recover, the fact that the USC's medical staff was very responsive with making sure that he would be okay. And so I think that for better and for worse, that very scary incident kind of reinforced everything for him. That family is obviously the most important part of his life, but it's also, really a driving force for what contributes to his motivation at this stage of his career. No doubt, he's obviously wants to win championships. He's being paid a hefty sum to play basketball. But I think when you look at Bronny's scare and the fact that he also was able to coach his other son, Bryce, during the Peach Jam tournament, those elements of family, I think, really crystallized, really his love for the game. And it also helped that he was able to physically and mentally hit the reset button this offseason after having a pretty taxing postseason run, most notably with his right foot injury that, really contributed to him making those comments after the Western Conference Finals that he might hang it up.
The sense that you get is that he's as healthy as he can be given age and obviously the wear on the tires when you're the greatest player of all time.
Yeah, if I'm LeBron James, I'm knocking on wood here, but yes, as healthy as can be. He said that, he said that his foot was the tendon was mostly almost torn this past postseason. Now he didn't say whether he had surgery or not, but from a recovery and rehab standpoint, he said he was pleased with it. He said that he has felt good when he's practiced, and now he has to admit that it's about how does it respond once training camp starts. So we'll have clarity on that. And you never know what Father Time will do, especially at his stage of his career. But, I think that there's a lot of optimism from the Lakers organization as well as LeBron himself because of his body of work, because of his diligent training and nutrition habits, that he's going to be on the better side of Father Time for the most part this season.
How many games is reasonable to expect for him next season?
Yeah, it's a very fair question, not just because of where he's at in his career, but also keep in mind with these NBA new resting policies, there is an exemption for players that are 35 or older, and LeBron James obviously fits that when it comes to sitting back to backs. So my suspicion is that I think the best case scenario is he's at 70 games. I think pencil him out, maybe not preemptively back to backs, but if he has some minor ailments, that will be the opportunity for him to sit out. I also think that they're going to scale his minutes back to the low 30s, and that is in line with what happened when they won a championship in 2020. In recent seasons, it was more in the mid 30s, and a lot of that had to do with roster construction and injuries. And so that really ties together the Lakers roster construction this season. They wanted to maintain a lot of the depth and continuity around the team, partly in hopes to make life easier for LeBron James. And they're also having a lot more tangible optimism that Anthony Davis is actually ready to become the next face of the franchise, because they've been raving about his offseason regimen. He looks a lot leaner. Darvin Ham said that looks a lot more explosive. And while we can't think that he'll play a full 82 games, even if he says that's his goal because of his injury history, there is a lot of reasonable optimism that we're not going to see the injury-plagued Anthony Davis that we've seen in the past few seasons.
So, with the way that table is being set, with everybody praising Anthony Davis for the work that was done in the offseason or how he looks physically, do you think that we will see something of a definitive passing of the torch this year if he is in fact healthy, in terms of shifting this away from LeBron's team really into his hands?
Yes, I think that the passing of the torch is going to be for more on the court. It's going to be about Anthony Davis being the offensive focal point, how many shots he's making. No doubt, as long as LeBron James is on the team, he's the leader of the team. He plays a large part in seeing how the offense is run. He'll play a large part in the facilitating game, but I think that there is a gradual passing of the torch from the offensive production as well as the defense. Now, in fairness, this is something that the Lakers and LeBron James have wanted to do ever since they got him 4 years ago, and that is something that happened during their first championship season, but because of injuries, because of Anthony Davis's own injuries and the Lakers' faulty roster for different reasons, pre and during Russell Westbrook's time here, LeBron James took on a more predominant role than both parties originally envisioned. So I think because of that, there is a lot of optimism of what happened this past season, that they can start reducing that heavy workload. But it is still going to be LeBron James running the team, but at least he won't have to carry everything once he's on the court.
And you mentioned the continuity of the roster. If Anthony Davis is in fact healthy enough to make significant contributions, how good is this Lakers team? I mean, are they built to win a championship this season?
The Lakers are certainly built to win a championship this season, but they're by no means the dominant runaway favorite. I mean, you have to obviously look at the Denver Nuggets. They won the championship last season. They did lose some key pieces in a Bruce Brown and an Ish Smith and a Jeff Green, but they have their own continuity with Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., Michael Malone as the coach. But then when you look at the rest of the landscape, all the other teams that are in this mix have made significant offseason moves. The Phoenix Suns getting Bradley Beal, the Milwaukee Bucks getting Damian Lillard, the Boston Celtics just getting Jrue Holiday, as well as Kristaps Porzingis. You put Golden State Warriors in the mix, obviously, because they still have Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, as well as Chris Paul, in hopes that his future Hall of Fame credentials can get them back into the promised land. So I think all those specific teams have a legitimate shot, and then it's going to be about the familiar formula of which team's the healthiest. And then when we're looking at the teams that made big moves versus the teams that are with continuity, which formula will work best. There's not really a right or wrong answer with that. Sometimes talent prevails, but sometimes chemistry prevails. That's kind of the ultimate intriguing thing that makes the NBA so interesting each season.
Yeah, I am fascinated by that dynamic, not just because I've seen it up close and personal here in New York with the way things didn't work out in Brooklyn, but I was also at Knicks Media Day, and that's a team that's got a tremendous amount of chemistry. Granted, some people think that they are that big name or big star away from really being able to contend in the East, particularly with how competitive it's going to be with the moves that you just mentioned with Milwaukee and Boston. But that's a group of guys that really seems to like each other. They've got this Villanova fraternity, internally, and it just seems very healthy from a chemistry standpoint. How valuable is that, and can the Knicks improve upon a fifth place finish in the Eastern Conference standings, do you think?
I think the Knicks certainly can improve on that fifth place standing. So much I think that they're going to be third in the Eastern Conference. Outside of Milwaukee and Boston, there's just so much turbulence elsewhere. I mean, the Philadelphia 76ers haven't resolved the James Harden situation. Who knows how long that'll take? When you look at the Chicago Bulls, they have mostly had the same roster. Now, talking to DeMar DeRozan before training camp, he was pretty bullish about their chances to get back in the mix and that they're just, a few handful of things away from, winning 10 to 12 games last season instead of missing the playoffs entirely after losing the play-in tournament. But I think that clearly Boston and Milwaukee have separated themselves because of not just the top heavy talent that they have, but as well as the depth around them. But look, even they're vulnerable. The Bucks had a lot of injuries last season, and that could very well continue. Same thing with the Celtics, specifically with Kristaps Porzingis, and we'll see how much of Marcus Smart's defense and leadership can be offset with just Jrue Holiday's addition alone. So there very much is a pathway for the New York Knicks to be in that mix because of the continuity piece, because they're very competitive and well coached, and they have a lot of roster balance. But I think in the NBA, usually talent prevails. So I'm going to give the obvious nod to Milwaukee and Boston. But 82 game seasons have a life of its own from a health and chemistry standpoint. So everything is always subject for change.
A lot of people who love watching the NBA are acutely aware of what Jrue Holiday brings, but how does he fit in specifically to this Celtics roster?
Well, he fits in perfectly because there was a void that was left with Marcus Smart. And that's not to say that he's going to directly replace Marcus Smart because, Marcus built a lot of equity that bought him a lot of leadership capital. But Jrue is one of the best two-way players in the game. Talking to people around the league, they feel he's also one of the most underrated defenders in the game. And so he gives them a lot of defense, and they're not going to really need him to score because Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown can take care of that. But he can be an extra ball handler to ensure that fluid ball movement so that it doesn't just get ISO heavy at times as it has in the past with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. And in fairness, that dynamic has improved in recent seasons, but I think with Jrue Holiday's addition, it can reach another level because of the way he plays. It's all about the team, and he also has a lot of championship experience that can help the Celtics get over the hump.
Seems like he could be the missing piece. I mean, as simple as that sounds, I feel like Tatum and Brown have not reached their full potential together, and the expectations have been sky high, but it seems like this is something of, I don't know, you tell me, a do or die season for them in terms of finally getting to the place where so many Celtics fans want them to go. Is Jrue Holiday enough, in your opinion, to maybe get them to, the finals and beyond?
We'll see, because here's a few unknowns. Kristaps Porzingis, a really good offensive player. He's an amazing floor spacer. He has a versatile skill set, both close to the basket and as a perimeter shooter. But even though he's done a lot of specific things to improve his body composition, he has his own extensive injury history. And then I think the bigger part is, even though that Jrue Holiday acquisition was huge, there's a reason why the Milwaukee Bucks were willing to make that painful decision to part with him, because they got Damian Lillard. I mean, when you look at that dynamic with Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton, I think that they're the best trio in the NBA, and specifically with Damian Giannis, they will be the best duo in the NBA. I can't think of many defenses that will have answers to how to defend Giannis and Damian in the pick and roll, or Damian shooting from the outside, or finding Giannis inside. That dynamic just seems on paper to be very perfect, and they also have the personalities to make that work. So because of that, I still give the edge to Milwaukee, and if the Boston Celtics fall up short, the reasons might have more to do with the Bucks' dominance than any of the Celtics' shortcomings. But no doubt, when it comes to kind of mitigating that difference between Milwaukee, they have to hit on all the right things. They got to establish the chemistry, they got to be healthy, and they also have to not just rely on their talent. They're going to have to rely on their depth as well.
I know you mentioned Denver in the West, obviously reigning champs. Is Milwaukee your preseason pick if you had to make one, or do you see maybe Denver as a better of the two?
Well, I don't think that there's a dominant favorite. I think that the teams I mentioned, Milwaukee, Boston, Denver, Golden State, Phoenix, and the Lakers, those are 6 teams that all have realistic possibilities to win an NBA championship. But out of those 6 teams, I would rank Milwaukee at number one because, again, Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo, they're top 75 players for a reason, and they just seem to be a duo that will fit perfectly on paper. Now, the Nuggets, I would rank second because Nikola Jokic is still one of the best players in the NBA, and they have the best continuity out of any team in the NBA. But I think unlike the years when the Golden State Warriors had Kevin Durant, this isn't an NBA landscape where there is this dominant team that it seems inevitable that they're going to punch their way to an NBA Finals appearance in June. There's 5 other teams that have a shot at it, and that's what's going to make, I think, this season very compelling from a competitive standpoint.
Yeah, how much better is it for the fans when there's parity in the league? Because we've seen those super teams come together, and you're really only describing, I guess, 6 teams out of both conferences that maybe could legitimately contend for a title at the end. But still, it does seem like the stars are a little bit more spread out than they've been in the past, which to me sounds a little bit more exciting that it's not a given before the season starts.
Yeah, I think it's exciting, no doubt. More exciting when there's more teams that have an actual shot at winning a championship than a dynasty team. But as far as what's better for the league, look, when you look at the history of the NBA, what's attracted viewership are those dominant dynastic teams, whether it's the Lakers, Celtics, the Chicago Bulls, the Lakers when Kobe and Shaq were there, the Golden State Warriors. So what's better for the actual quality of the product? That's not an easy answer. But I think that what is good is in this case, specifically with this season, there's parity because there's a lot of good teams. It's not that there's parity because there's a bunch of mediocre teams. And so I think because of that, that's going to add more importance to a regular season that the NBA has already tried to make different efforts to attach more meaning to with these new rest rules, the in-season tournament. So I think from that standpoint, there will be some more regular season spice. But don't get twisted here. When the Cavs and the Warriors are the NBA Finals, that was very good for the league, and it attracted a lot of eyeballs.
What have fans made of this rest rule or the tweaking that the league has done? I'm assuming as a direct result of some of the rest that we've seen from these stars in the back-to-back games.
Yeah, I think the proof's going to be in the pudding on how this actually is implemented. No doubt fans get frustrated when stars are not available for marquee games, whether it's fans that are going to games or that they want to watch on TV, because it's a pretty hefty investment, whether it's a financial investment with going to games or investment of their time with just watching on TV with everyone's busy lives. But I think, talking to players, recently, as well as in other years, the whole load management has more to do with organizations and how they're functioned than players trying to, sit out games. You have training staffs and front offices that have been more vocal about wanting to sit players to maximize, their productivity as well as their long-term investment. These are people at the end of the day, but organizations are looking at them as assets, and they want to protect their assets. And so, from when it comes to players, most of them do want to suit up all 82 games. There may be obvious exceptions with players behind the scenes that say, hey, I need to sit out, I don't want to play through this, and that might have contradicted the old school mentality of players fighting through ailments. But this culture mostly is because of what has been delivered from up top. And so, with these financial penalties, maybe this will be enough incentives for organizations to at least maybe not solve this completely, but at least to make those players available for marquee games that are on national TV against big opponents. But at the end of the day, organizations are going to value the long-term health. So I don't think that this is going to dramatically change anything beyond making sure that multiple players aren't sitting out the same games and that huge stars aren't missing national TV games.
A couple more for you. Talking with Mark Medina, longtime NBA writer here. Mark, I know you briefly touched on James Harden a couple of minutes ago, but what should fans expect in terms of his availability, whether or not we're going to see him play, how much he's going to play, if the Sixers are going to be mediocre? Like, where are we right now with Philadelphia?
I think Sixer fans should just be prepared for anything that could happen. I mean, James Harden has obviously already missed media day. There's no sign when he's going to return to practice. He has had a past record of doing this when he was with the Houston Rockets when he wanted out. But I think the Philadelphia 76ers, even though this hasn't been resolved yet, they're internally optimistic that eventually it will be resolved once there's the financial penalties with paychecks, which I think will start, in November. There's also a different dynamic with the team. The fact that Joel Embiid is on the team, the fact that they have a new head coach that James Harden wanted in Nick Nurse, I think that could put more pressure on James Harden just to report eventually, because on paper, they're still a legitimate playoff team and they still could have a shot at winning a championship if they get all their you-know-what together. And so with that, this could be different than what happened with the Rockets, where they're clearly in a rebuilding stage and he just wanted out. But James Harden is a player that is very unconventional. When he doesn't get his way, he has not shown any hesitation of being unprofessional to try to shake some trees.
It's almost like he needs this, Mark, to get motivated. I'm so confused about what the agenda has been at all of these different stops, where it's inevitable that there's going to be some kind of drama surrounding his availability. I mean, does he just need to have something to motivate him? What do you take away from all this?
Well, I think that each case, there's a lot of layers. Even though I didn't think he handled it the right way, I understood why he went out of the Houston Rockets. They were clearly in a rebuilding stage, and him playing there wouldn't lead to any championship success. I understand why he wanted out of Brooklyn as well, with the fact that Kyrie Irving wasn't available on a consistent basis because of his own undoing, with not wanting to adhere to local vaccination rules. But with the Philadelphia 76ers, while I do understand his frustration level with any implied promise or maybe direct promise, we'll never truly know that he would be compensated a lot more because he took that discount contract last summer. He has to know the leverage that he has, and the leverage that he has is zero, because there's not really a market for him. Even though on paper he is an elite talent, there's a lot of questions about his durability as well as just how he performs in high stakes playoff games. And so because of that, I think that he just has to read the room. It would be one thing if he was playing at elite level and he wound up not getting a contract that he thought that he was deserving of. But there's a reason why he wasn't getting a contract that he thought he was deserving of, because he was struggling to stay healthy and consistently perform last season.
We haven't touched on the Clippers yet, so just a couple quick ones for you. It seems like they are healthy for the most part coming into the season. Kawhi, Paul George, are they a team that will contend this year, in your opinion?
I guess on paper, you have to give them a chance, but I'm always skeptical that they're ever going to reach this pipe dream of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and their core roster can be healthy on a consistent basis. Now, I know dating back to when they lost in the first round during the playoffs, the Clippers have talked about putting more importance in regular season games, and maybe that'll increase the participation level as well as the ramp up for players' workload so that they're maybe not more susceptible to injuries. But I think in fairness, their injuries are their injuries and they're real. So, I think that it's going to be the same story as it was in the past seasons. They have a lot of good depth, a lot of good potential, but the injury bug is going to continue to inhibit them from taking that next step.
Mark, what do you make of Zion Williamson's efforts to get more fit in the offseason?
I mean, it's good for him to say it, and we'll see if the proof is in the pudding with him. I mean, when you're evaluating, NBA players, it's more about what they do and not what they say. And I think in fairness to Zion, the Pelicans have said that he was always coachable and that he was receptive to feedback and from the coaching staff, receptive to feedback from the training staff, and also receptive to feedback from the nutrition staff ever since he entered the NBA in 2019. But that doesn't mean that he was a finished product. And so the fact that he's going to continue to chip away at that weakness is a good thing. But we haven't seen whether that's good enough or not, because the reality is Zion Williamson has not been able to consistently stay available on the floor. And it's very difficult for the Pelicans to navigate this, because when he has been on the floor, he has been a dominant player and he's shown ongoing improvement in his game itself. But I'm in a wait and see mode when it comes to Zion, just because of the old adage that the best ability as availability.
Yeah. So just to wrap on this, Mark, you went through and kind of broke down the top six or so teams that you think will really contend for a title this year. When you look at the second level and the third level of teams in both the East and the West, is there a team that you think is right on the brink, maybe a player away, or could surprise us this season that might actually make something of a Cinderella run?
I don't think there's a lot of surprises. I think that the second tier of teams, you look at Cleveland and Chicago and New York in the East, in the West, you look at teams like Sacramento and New Orleans and Portland. Those are teams that are expected to be in that mix, but not quite enough to make a championship run. And then when you're looking at, some of the rebuilding teams, there's going to be a lot of excitement, obviously, with the San Antonio Spurs because of Victor Wembanyama, but I don't think that there's really any expectation that they're going to make the playoffs. The Houston Rockets, they finally added some veteran players this season with Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. They have a proven head coach in Ime Udoka, but I think that there is not any feeling that they could make the playoffs either. That's more about getting the bridge from not playing well at all to playing respectable so that they can make a push next season. So I think that, when we're looking at the whole tier of teams, it's going to be what's expected. There's not going to be any Cinderella teams, but still, it's going to be a fascinating season because there are those six legitimate teams that could win an NBA championship, and it's really pick your choice.
Mark Medina going around the league. Thank you so much for the time. Appreciate the updates, and we'll keep talking to you as the season gets here. It's pretty much here. It's wild. Get some sleep while you can.
I appreciate you. It'll be fun.